Good afternoon. My name is Alex Lerman, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at the New York Design Center. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program on social media etiquette. We are thrilled and honored to have today's esteemed panelists with us for what we know will be an important, informative, and lively conversation. We also wanted to give a special thank you to Christina Juarez for helping us put together this panel and always being such a supportive partner, friend, for 200 Lex. And now I'm going to turn the program over to our incredible moderator, the one and only Hadley Keller, Senior Editor at House Beautiful Magazine. Thank you so much and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, 200 Lex, for putting this together. I think we're going to have fun. I think this is obviously a very timely topic and one that I think we're all curious to talk about and to hear from. And I'm really excited about this group because we kind of have such a range of people in the industry who will have their own opinions on this hot topic. So let's go through. I'm sure many of you recognize some of these faces, but we have my colleague, Robert Rufino, the style director of House Beautiful. We have Mika Tenhav, who is a wonderful stylist, whose work you've probably seen. We have Nashville designer Lori Paranjape, and we have Kiana Bowen, who is an interiors photographer and blogger. So I'm so excited to get started and to hear everyone's kind of point of view on this world of social media, where, as we know, we all, I'm sure, get so much inspiration and are able to share, work and life. But in some ways, it's kind of the Wild West in terms of etiquette and norms and crediting. So we're going to get into all that. But to start, just to give us kind of a jumping off point, I'd love to hear from all four of our panelists just on the biggest way that they use social media for their work, and if that has evolved at all in the recent years. I'd love to hear that. So let's start there. And why don't we, Mika, I know you have to jump off a little bit early, not yet, but why don't we just start with you and then we can go from there.
Well, I think Instagram was one of those things that in the beginning, I remember I had a private account. I was working at Vogue at the time. And I just didn't foresee, I'm such a sort of Luddite, and I'm not very prescient when it comes to technology, and especially platforms like Instagram. It's not necessary. I mean, for some people that are digital natives, I think it's rather intuitive, but it hasn't been for me. So when it first came on the scene and I first joined, I had a private account. And it was private for a really long time. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait, this isn't, just a social media thing where people are like sharing pictures of their dog and their husband and their baby. It's really a way that you can put yourself out there in the world visually and promote your own point of view. And then, ever since then, obviously I've been using it as a tool to share my point of view and my work.
How about you, Lori?
I started sharing my interior design, and like Mika, I started sharing some of my life and kind of fumbled my way through in the beginning, but really I've been on Instagram for a long time now. So, I was one of the early ones who started using it as more of a tool, and started paying for professional photography and started using it as a living, breathing portfolio of my work. And it has just transformed my business, and 95% of my business comes from my Instagram feed, and people are in my DMs and sending me links, and I can see them linking through my Instagram to come to me to send me a design inquiry. So it's been a game changer for me.
That's great. And I'm so excited to hear more about that. Kiana, I'm curious for you too, because coming at it from the side of blogger as well as photographer, tell us about how you use that in kind of both ways.
Sure. Well, initially, when I got on Instagram, it was specifically for the purpose of my blog, Easton Lane, and just to share inspirational images and things like that would connect back to my blog. Over time, as I started to transition to doing interior photography, I started receiving inquiries for photography through Easton Lane, which was initially just for blogging. If you guys have worked with me, you know that I actually have a separate company, which is just Kiana Bowen Photography, that I use for my photography. And I'm actually in the process of transitioning everything under Easton Lane, since I am starting to receive photography inquiries through that account. But yeah, initially just joining, it was for the purpose of, you know, sharing inspirational design images and as a creative outlet for my blog, but slowly it's transitioning into a business, you know, platform for me as well.
And Robert, I'm curious to hear from you, because I think you maybe feel similarly to me in that for us, it's kind of almost the other side where you're putting something out there, but as an editor, you're also probably on there looking for projects, finding things, discovering. How do you most use the platform?
I think well, number one, I use it to promote the magazine and what we're doing, and what I've shot, what I want to promote for the magazine. But also, you know, it's a great vehicle to discover designers and products. I mean, I've discovered some designers on Instagram, and I think it's a wonderful thing for young designers to showcase their work, and that's a great vehicle. I mean, what I don't like about Instagram, when a designer posts a picture and I read the whole thing, it's like, it's not their work. So let's talk. I mean, I know I'm talking something that we want to talk about. Let's be fair, and let's use this vehicle for what it's made for. But you know, it's so funny. You know, well, you know, if I post a picture of my dog or a flower, what people like, what people don't like. I mean, you know, I got 1,000 pictures of something that really, you know, it's like, I don't understand it sometimes, but it's a fun thing to participate in, and you know, people are being discovered, and you could be this today and that tomorrow in the world of Instagram.
Yeah,
it's the funny thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's, you know, obviously you kind of segued right into one of the most important things we want to talk about, which is this kind of dilemma of wanting to share inspiration or to celebrate the work of other creatives, but not to, you know, cross that line of passing it off like your own. So I'm really curious to hear from everyone here, you know, what you think is the kind of proper way to credit someone else's work, or if you're a designer, how do you want to be credited? And then also, is there a fair and good way to you know, be showcasing work that's not your own when you want to do that? Lori, do you want to take that to start?
Yeah, I think it's complex. It's also new. So it used to be when I would buy House Beautiful and I would flip through it, it was very clear that they were featuring a designer, there was a stylist involved, there was a photographer involved, there was a producer involved, and it was all very clearly credited, and there was no confusion about what we were looking at. And now, you know, my feed is obviously curated to me and my liking and my political views and everything I'd like to see that's funny and whatever I'd like to look at on my Instagram feed. But I am often fooled by what I'm seeing. And to Robert's point, which is why we sort of have all gathered here as professionals in this industry that are providing content out into the world. As a designer, I feel like my feed is my portfolio. So what you see is my work, and the people involved are credited in that work. What I don't particularly adore is feeds that are designers who are just like me, who are showcasing other work. It would be very easy for me to just call the internet or Instagram to fill my feed with beauty. I could post 40 times a day with beautiful images if the internet was my source, but it's my projects. And it takes time and effort and love and money and all sorts of things to get to that point. So for me, the short answer to that on the designer side is I feel like designers should share their work and be shared for their work, but potentially not by other designers.
So I want to get back to that, because I think there are maybe differing opinions, and you know, the flip side, which is okay, but if you do share, what's the way to do it? But I want to say a little bit before that to Kiana. You actually posted something on Instagram, I think earlier today, that was something like, you know, kind of a vignette or something about, with a caption of like, even if you don't have a whole project, you can share. Can you tell me a little bit about that and about that concept that, okay, even if you're a creative or maybe you're starting out and you don't have an entire home that's been shot for House Beautiful to share, what are ways that you can still kind of express your aesthetic in a way that's true to you and not, maybe infringing on other people's work?
Sure. I think like Lori was saying, everything is still so new and things are moving very quickly with technology. And so, for me, being a content creator whose purpose is to share other people's content, share my own content, and then in the same hand, also being a photographer who's very, sensitive to how I'm being credited and how my images are being used. I definitely have like an interesting point of view on that topic, which I know we'll get more into. But as far as trying to create vignettes, if you don't have a full room, I know a lot of issues, especially with new designers, new content creators, is trying to find a way to showcase your own work. One of the things we just brought up is we all went around and we talked about how we use social media, how we use Instagram. And some of us had different reasons. We had portfolio, we had inspiration, we had day-to-day lifestyle stuff. And so as a designer or aspiring designers, I think it's important to make sure if you're not using it for a portfolio, meaning showing your own work, maybe you specify somewhere in there that these are inspirational images. I make sure that I always say I'm an interior design blogger. Like, I'm not an interior designer, because I don't want people to get confused thinking that I do design work just, for anybody and everybody. I do it with the intent to create content. So there's little things that we can dive into there. But as far as like, if you are a new designer or an old designer and don't have projects to shoot, trying to find little spaces in your home. It could be a nook and cranny, a corner, a hallway, which is what was posted on my Instagram today. And just using a few little decor accessories that to create little vignettes to capture your work that can be your own content. So it's not always about, a huge space or a huge project to have. There's ways to kind of get creative and find little spaces in your home or in your friend's home that you can kind of redesign a little bit to have your own work out there.
That's great. Mika, I'm curious what your thoughts are as a stylist here, and also as someone who I know is, following plenty of interior design accounts.
Yeah, well, I think there's an interesting trend happening in Instagram where like a lot of people are starting to use it more as like a Pinterest page, where it becomes like this kind of content farm of inspirational images. And I think it's one thing if you're like positing it as such, that this is like your point of view of beautiful things that you think are beautiful. But I do think that there is kind of a strange, and some of those accounts have like so many followers, but it's like they are not the magician behind the images. They're just kind of recirculating things that are, quite widely out there. And then I think that there are a lot of designers, and maybe it's because it's like, it's tricky. Like beautiful images are hard to come by. So I think it is kind of an easy thing to be like, okay, well, if I can't post this image because I haven't shot it yet, or it's going to go on my website, or it's going to go to a magazine, I'm going to reach out and see what other images inspire me and throw them up there. And I think that there's this tendency where you're scrolling, there's so many images on Instagram, like everybody follows so many people. And if you're just kind of aimlessly scrolling, it's so easy to believe, oh, the person who posted this photo is the author of this work. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people think that. I think they see a beautiful image, it's under the account of an interior designer, and it's like, oh yeah, of course that decorator did that, because why would they be posting an image of work that isn't their own? Mm-hmm. And then to Robert's point that he made earlier, it's like a lot of times, or maybe it was Lori that said this, a lot of times like you see a post and there's like this whole long caption about it, and then you get to the very end and you realize it's not their work. And a lot of times people never get to the end of that post, so they never know that it's not their work. And then a lot of times, like, I'll see people post something that, they don't credit the decorator, they don't credit the photographer, they certainly don't credit the stylist. And it's like they're just plucking an image out of the ether and throwing it up on their feed. And, I just don't think you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say it's like lacks integrity, but I don't think it's the right way to, you know, approach your Instagram account.
Yeah, no, I think that's so interesting. And I also think, I mean, beyond talking about integrity, I do think there's a point to this too that's interesting, which is if a lot of designers are using this as a way to maybe get clients or to hopefully get published. And I'm curious to hear, Robert, your thoughts, and anyone else, you know, if you're going through your account, you think, well, I love this person's style, I'm going to hire them, or I want to work with them, you know, as an editor. And then you come to realize, oh, wait, that's actually not their style. What is that? You know, Robert, how does that kind of come into play when you're trying to kind of maybe ascertain what, you know, what someone's work really looks like and it's not theirs?
No, this is a good example. I was following this chap for quite some time. I was like, oh my God, this guy does incredible work. And so then I sent him an email saying, you know, who I was. And I said, I love your work. I said, how can we talk? And I'd love to see a full project. So he said, oh, that's not my work. These are just things that I'm inspired by. So I said, but you're not even saying that. You're just posting pictures and you're leading people on. And I said, and for me as a magazine editor, where I'm looking for new talent, I said, I just really think it's a disservice. Of course, he was not very happy with that. But, you know, I just find it wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And I, you know, for me, I call people out. It's like, why are you doing that? You're giving the wrong message, you know? And, you know, there's a few young designers who I know in the beginning, they were doing the same things. Like, guys, you can't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's misleading. And take it from me, it's like, you know, so when you give me a project, is it really yours, or did you really do the whole project? You know, you question people, you know? It's like a red light goes up. And you know, I just think, you know, as Mika said, I just think it's, you know, just be honest, you know, just be honest. You know,
I mean, I think that's right. That's the ultimate thing, right? Is if you're going to do it, okay, then let's talk about, you know, make sure it's very clear up front, credit it. And I'm curious, I think, Lori, you wanted to say something else, but I wonder maybe this can tie in too. We talked before a little bit about those kind of crediting guidelines. And do you feel differently about how things should be credited if someone's sharing, if it's just, you know, an individual fan posting inspiration as opposed to a brand or a competing designer or a company? How does that kind of come into play?
I think it's why all of us as professionals decided to maybe take an opportunity here that was provided as on a platform for us to discuss it, because I don't think that the rules are incredibly clear out there in the ethos to, you know, as Mika said, that, oh, that's pretty, and here I love this, and here I love this, and here I love this. I think for me, my personal guidelines, right? This is, I can only speak from my own perspective, is I think for designers, I think designers should be sharing their own work. And to Kiana's point that she said that, you know, if you don't have a lot of work, I think my sort of internal response to that was, we're not all owed equal time in-house beautiful, right? You earn that. You earn your way to those publications, and you earn your way by doing the work and getting it in front of people and getting it published. You know, you don't necessarily, just because you have an Instagram account, which is free, by the way, have the right to just populate it with the work of other people. And I think that there should be some guidelines. So I think photographers sharing designers' work, properly crediting designers sharing photographers, you know, I think there's some allowances in there, as long as we're really being honest. We discussed kind of in prep for this, you know, maybe the first line out of the gate is inspired by
right.
at Mrs. Peranjape. Beautiful work, Mrs. Peranjape. This inspired me, and I would love to redesign my dining room. You know, but out front, but you know, I'm feeling moody, and a moody dining room is just my style. Return, 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 credit someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot help but think that that is intentionally misleading.
Yeah.
And
It's disingenuous, I think.
It really is.
Yeah.
And someone either, you know, Robert or someone on his staff or their magazine paid for that shoot, or the designer paid for that shoot, and I spent 3 years on a project, and, you know, pay for styling and photography and publicist and submit it and get it out there, and it's out there in the world, and then pop, 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 off it goes.
Well, I think that brings us to a different point too, which is the concept of photography and, you know, paying to shoot as a designer, or, you know, maybe even as a stylist, paying to have your projects shot. And I'm curious to hear, let's start with you, Kiana, your thoughts on, you know, the kind of benefits of designers, you know, paying to have their own work photographed, and then how that plays into, you know, the rights that that photographer or that designer or anyone else involved have in sharing those images on social.
Sure. I mean, I can only speak for myself and my personal contracts, but you know, obviously, I think over the years when Instagram was just a hobby type thing and it didn't really matter, and now because it's being monetized and used so much for business, I think a lot of designers understand the need to invest in professional photography for social media. So that's not understanding the investment is not necessarily an issue I have anymore. I think a lot of interior designers know, okay, it's worth me investing in photography. As far as what happens after that, personally, I maintain the copyright to my images. And then I license usage rights to the interior designer to use the images on their social media for customary self-promotional activities. In the event that a third party is interested, like a magazine is interested in using the images, they do need to contact me for permission. And so that's kind of how my process goes.
Got it. Got it. Mika, since I know you're going to head out in a little bit, I want to hear you a little bit from your specific perspective on, you know, advice you have or your thoughts on, you know, designers who are maybe looking to find or work with stylists through Instagram.
You know, I did this chat with, it was a podcast with Michael Boudreau and Robert Ruffino the other day. And I think the point that we both kind of arrived at is that images are they have so much value now because there aren't that many magazines left that are publishing stories the way that they used to. I mean, even the magazines that are still left, there aren't that many issues left of them. I mean, they're not running 12 times a year. And then, you know, and subsequently, you know, they need to kind of take the reins and publish the images themselves, whether it's on social media or their website or whatever other means. And it's just a question of looking. I mean, every stylist has a different point of view and a different take. They have a different mood to their work, and it's the same thing with photographers. And you can really only ascertain the differences if you really look at their work and you look at various aspects of their work, from, you know, maybe editorial or advertising or whatever the case may be. But, you know, everybody has a different point of view and a signature. And if you're paying attention and if you're looking and you're consuming, you can sort of understand what distinguishes their work and the nuances therein. So it's really a question of just taking the time to look. And I think like certain stylists are better suited for certain projects. Like some stylists are more exuberant and some stylists are more traditional, and some stylists are more minimal and modern. And I think actually looking at social media and looking at what they're putting out on Instagram is kind of a great way to gauge what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. To shift gears a little, I want to ask about, you know, kind of another kind of element of etiquette, which is thinking about, you know, we're all here because we use Instagram professionally in some capacity, but obviously it's personal too. And Mika, you mentioned kind of beginning it as a personal thing. What are everyone's thoughts on, you know, sharing, you know, the pictures of the dog or the kids as opposed to sharing work? Can those go together? Is there a limit? Should you have a separate account at a certain point? What do you all think? I'll let anyone take this who wants to.
I think your Instagram account is your story. It's who you are. I mean, I wear a House Beautiful hat and I wear my personal hat. It's all connected of and who the person I am and how I live my life. I live my life through my work. I care about what I do. And what I post on my personal life is an extension of the person who I am and how I live my life, whether it's with my dog or doing a table setting at home or walking in the field and photographing a landscape. It's a mood board. It's all about that person. It's your story, you know.
For me, for my Instagram, it really very clearly for me, it's a business account. I am the business, you know, it's we can't be separated, the two of us. So I do share a little bit about who the person is behind what's happening. And I try to show, you know, even if it's a photo of myself, like sometimes I'll post a photo and they're like, wow, it's so nice to see you, because they don't listen to stories, or that's not how they engage on social media. And so connecting me to the project, I have found relates very clearly to how people hire me. That when they hire me, they're, you know, I'm not often interviewed. They have met me, they have listened to me, they have seen me, they understand what this is and how I operate. I talk about it a lot, process, and really they're just asking how much is it, and then we sign the contract. So that's how I'm using it and how I'm deciding what to share. So there's a little personal, so you understand who I am, because that's what you get when you hire me, is you get me, that I'm the girl in the meeting. I'm the girl, you know, on the other end of a Zoom call, and I'm the person, you know, with my team making all of the magic happen. So I find that letting them in on who I am is helpful when they're sitting at home on their phone deciding which designer to hire. I think that's part of the equation. Or it definitely comes to me that way.
Absolutely.
I just want to jump
similar-
in and interject because I have to leave, but I just want to say thank you to Hadley and all the panelists, and to House Beautiful and the New York Design Center and Christina Juarez, because this was a pleasure, and I'm sorry I have to leave so soon.
Thank you so much, Mika.
Have a good panel.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Safe.
Keep going, guys. Kiana, did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was saying that, you know, initially I was just sharing more inspirational photos, photos that I've shot. And then over time, as my mission kind of changed for my purpose behind blogging my account, which transitioned into me really wanting to be a hope and an inspiration for Black girls, because there's not a lot of us out there in the design world, and definitely not in the interior photographer world. I started to incorporate more personal posts, lifestyle posts myself. I mean, I'm still always shocked anytime I post a picture of like myself and my husband. For some reason, it just like goes crazy. So it's like, maybe I should just make it a husband and wife account now. I don't know. But yeah, I do think that incorporating little snippets of your life is fine.
Yeah.
Even if it's a business account, because like Lori was saying, at the end of the day, they are hiring you as the person, not just, you know, for the pretty picture of the design, but really they connect with you as a person.
I love that. I love that you, you know, kind of consciously made that change. And I think that also begs a question of something that's really intrinsic to social media that we didn't really touch on, but that's the kind of community aspect of it, right? And I'm sure, you know, we all have kind of like relationships, whether that's like people whose work we admire and we go back and forth with, or friendships that have kind of started this way. And it's a very weird, you know, thing to have this, maybe kind of, you know, was predicting a little bit of how 2020 would be, but to have these kind of wholly virtual relationships. I'm curious, I know this isn't something we kind of discussed ahead of time, so I'm throwing this into the mix, but I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on how, you know, how social media has been able to kind of develop, you know, community outside, maybe, you know, it is work, but, you know, kind of with friendships as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that really quick. And I'll kind of tie it back into the idea or the quandary about, you know, sharing and if you should be sharing other people's work. You know, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. And of course, there's been times when my work was shared and I wasn't credited and things like that. But if I really look back and think of like what has happened and what can happen through sharing, it's community. It's being able to build a community. I mean, we experienced one of the most tragic, horrific things to have happened, which has happened over the decades to Black people, but you know, the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And although it was such a tragedy, what came from that was movements, social movements that were kind of founded on sharing. We had Blackout Tuesday, we had Amplify Melanated Voices, we had Share the Mic campaigns. And, you know, quite honestly, if those initiatives that were based on sharing the work of minority and Black designers and creatives as a whole, if that didn't happen, I probably wouldn't have even been afforded the opportunity to speak on this panel today, because you guys wouldn't have known who the heck I was, you know? And it's one of those things where it's like, although there are times when people are disingenuous and, you know, aren't crediting appropriately, or just the whole intent behind why they're sharing isn't great. There are many more times, in my opinion, where we need to come together as a community and showcase the work of others in order to help expose and amplify voices and, you know, just create a more diverse landscape, especially in the design field. So, you know, going back to the whole community thing, I think that is one of the great things that has happened in social media, how I am now able to, you know, even speak on this panel. And I really do credit it to the fact that my work was shared and my name was shared.
I think that's such a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. And I think absolutely, I mean, in that instance, and just in general, that right, there is this element to sharing too that is, you know, especially maybe more pronounced voices being able to share up and coming work, people who wouldn't normally, you know, see certain things, and being able to kind of have those intersections, which has been so wonderful through this. I completely agree. I'm glad you made that connection. Lori, do you want to add to that?
Well, just to Kiana's point, that I was one of those people who, you know, embarrassingly found that I was not, you know, soliciting the work of people of color on my design projects. I was not hiring Black artists. I was not commissioning works from them. I was not looking to diversify the way that I was distributing the wealth of my clients on design projects. And I learned a lot this year. I learned a lot. So dovetailing perfectly and giving the listeners and the people on this program listening a little takeaway is what I shared in that time was artist. Here is a maker. And so it wasn't competing with what I'm selling. It wasn't suggesting that I do those things. It was lifting someone up and saying, I didn't realize, and I want to use my platform to share this platform with others. And now, as soon as I get photography done on all the projects I've been working on this year, I'll be able to share the work of people of color that are now in my projects that never existed before, because I was so, you know, painfully unaware and ignorant to the issue. But so the social has given me that community, but it also gave me an opportunity to use and share in a way that I felt amplified others, as opposed to misrepresenting and pushing myself forward in hopes of someone mistakenly thinking that I made those ceramics or I created that piece of artwork. But I think crediting where crediting is due, and really being clear and never allowing for someone to maybe not notice that it wasn't mine. I think that's where there is a really clear line.
Well, it's interesting. I almost think now that we, you know, arrived to this point, that's almost, you know, and I'm curious if you all agree or disagree, that maybe that's kind of the lens you want to be looking through when you're sharing, right? Is like, am I doing this because I want to share this person's work and amplify because I think they're great and talented, or am I doing it because I kind of hope people will pass it off as my own? And, you know, if it's the former, like, great, and that's the kind of sharing and you know, kind of cross promotion and support that we love. And if it's the latter, maybe you're going to take a second and think like, okay, is there another way I could do this that I could, you know, make it a little bit more true to my aesthetic and my offerings. Robert, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just going back to the whole Black Lives Matter, you know, when all that happened, of course, everyone was very upset. And, you know, just searching the internet and, you know, looking at, so much came up on everyone's Instagram, you know, especially, you know, the Black community. And, I just started looking and then discovering some new designers. And then, I had this back and forth with this chap and wound up, meeting him and doing a fantastic shoot in his apartment that's going to come up for Christmas. And, he was extremely overwhelmed that, not being conceited at all, that, oh my God, you're Robert Ruffino. I was like, yeah, so what? I'm just a person, but I want to come into your home. And we just collaborated and took his apartment to another level. And just, for me, it was a feel good. It was a way of continuing to reach out to this person. And of course, the person happened to be Black, but it was just another layer of I just felt so proud that I took that leap. And yes, at House Beautiful, we have promoted Black designers forever and ever. But this was just going, and is this going to work? Is this not? And we just had this little back and forth. I love the project. Oh, I'm moving to a new apartment, but it's not going to be ready till September. And then I came up with this idea because I loved his aesthetic. I said, how about if I did a Christmas shoot, but not with a Christmas tree? And he said, okay. And, I got there the day before, we played around, and, for both of us, I think we came to this place that was so gratifying. And, it's a lesson to people, like, don't be afraid, reach out and do something that you really wouldn't have done. And maybe because that happened this summer with all this hate that went on. I don't know. I mean, for me, it was a joy. And it was, for me, I felt I was giving something to a young designer, who happened to be Black. And he gave something to me. He gave me the ability to come in and to give him this experience. And it was just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think
more people need to just stop being so goddamn uptight and just let loose. Just
yes, absolutely. Well, I think I love that story and how that came about, Robert. And I think that's, the kind of takeaway there is just right that we have, I mean, again, to talk on the more kind of positive side here of social media, is you have kind of endless opportunity for connections that maybe otherwise wouldn't have occurred, right? And I think that's maybe the way that we should all be thinking about this more is, okay, how can I expand? How can I, be discovering? I think sometimes we're also, at this point, we're so kind of oversaturated. Everyone's on social media. We're seeing so much. This kind of sense of discovery is something I think people get a little jaded to. But, if you expand your circles, if you're looking at new things, you can really have those moments of making new connections and discovering new talents, new people. And I think that can obviously have wonderful results, like in that instance, which was great. I want to open it up if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask of our panelists. We'll open it if people want to drop any questions in the chat or in the Q&A function that we can relay to the group here. I saw one that kind of gets back to some of our earlier conversation. Someone asked thoughts on reposting, and I think that probably means that, posting through, for example, the Repost app, so it's clear it's a repost as opposed to, just taking a photo and sharing it. Does anyone feel like that's a better option, worse option, the same, doesn't matter?
I think it's just about highlighting the fact that it's not yours.
Yeah.
And making sure that that's understood, and instead of, hoping that it gets passed off as your own. To me, I think that's where the integrity is, and where we're, offering clarity in a world of a scroll, which some will still be mistaken. And for me, my choice has been that the work on my feed is my own, period. And everything you see is mine. And for others, it's different. I just feel like there's not really good opportunity for misrepresentation. So to post with integrity and make sure that we're being very, very clear with what we're sharing is everything. Maybe for me, there's one rule, and the rule is to don't misrepresent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think whether you're reposting through a repost app that says repost on it, or just personally, like Lori was saying, it all just comes back to your intent. Only you know why you are sharing that photo. And sometimes it's pretty obvious in that caption when it's totally unrelated to the photo. It doesn't mention the designer and the credit until, the very, very bottom, or if at all. And so, with me, where I have work that I've photographed, but maybe not designed, and then I have work that I have designed and photographed, I'm always very careful and particular about how I caption things. If you look at the post we were talking about earlier, like in the caption, I'm saying multiple times the designer's name, the designer's name. I love how the designer did this, even though I photographed the work, just so people don't mistaken that maybe I created that vignette. And so again, it's just really going back to your intent, which is shown in the caption, which is shown in how you reference the photo, how you reference the work, crediting it, yes, credit in the actual caption, as well as crediting through a tag, tagging the photographer, tagging the designer. And, back in the day, there used to be a rule that unspoken rule, I should say, that the best way is to reach out and ask permission. And that kind of dwindled away by the wayside, where now you don't have to ask permission. You just need to make sure you credit. But, at the end of the day, if you're admiring somebody's work, send them a DM and say, I love this photo. I would love to share it on my feed. Are you okay with that?
That's a great point. I love that. And I also think, like, to be honest, then that gets back to that point of, what we're saying is one of the positives of our ability to do this, which is connections, connectivity. And maybe there's a way then you work together, or you know each other's work, and that becomes deeper than just me throwing this in my feed as an info image. We have a great question in the Q&A, which is, what are your feelings about retail or manufacturing companies reposting your work to promote and sell products? Anyone have any thoughts?
So personally speaking, the way my contract and copyright is set up is that anytime a third party is interested in my photos or a photo that I've shot, they need to reach out to me. So technically the designer cannot sell the image to, Serena and Lily or Crate and Barrel or whatever, the case may be. They would need to receive permission from me. And so that's just something, I guess, to talk to or through with whoever you are photographing with. If it's your desire to be able to, use or share the photos with your vendors, that's something that needs to be discussed with your photographer ahead of time, so you guys can work out the correct licensing agreement for that. But yeah, I think obviously manufacturers know that they can get cheap, easy promotion with just resharing a picture. So just be mindful that when you're tagging something, I see a lot of times also where it will be like a company might comment on your photo saying like, we love how you used our chairs, hashtag whatever, to allow us to reshare it. And there's a link. If you guys aren't clicking through to that link and seeing what those permissions are that you're granting them, it's just don't hashtag it. Don't hashtag, Serena and Lily or whoever, if you don't know what you're actually agreeing to by allowing them to reshare that photo.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, understanding what you are agreeing to is paramount. This can become their advertising campaign. This can become their billboard. Can become the cover of their catalog. They're using it on their website. I've had different experiences with brands at this stage of my career. If a brand is interested in using my work to sell their product, I would like to be approached first to make an arrangement. And then we proceed with all parties understanding what's happening. I think for them to see something that looks really beautiful and then just snag it and pop it up onto their feed because I happen to use their light fixture, or I happen to use their, bowl on a plate or something, is really taking my work for them to use as free marketing.
Yeah.
And I a client paid me, I paid a photographer, I potentially paid a stylist, I potentially worked for years to get to that one gorgeous image. And for them, you know, to ask in a hashtag if I can have this for the rest of my life and use it however I'd like to use it. I think brands do know better. And I think we should hold them to a higher standard. If the brand says, hey, Mrs. Paranchape, we love your work. And on your next project, if you would let us know anywhere where you might be interested in using one of our blah, blah, blahs, and then we would pay for the photography, or we would pay you for the photographer, or we would, you know, would you like to do that?
Mhm.
I'm a yes.
Yeah.
A yes from me, probably, if the brand aligns with what I'm doing. And that to me is the way to approach that for brands, not the other way around. Oh, you paid me for the product, you paid for all of this, the client paid you, you did all of this, and now can I just
Right. Yeah.
Which brings up another important thing for individuals who do share other people's content. Be mindful that you are not the designer, even though you might know where those chairs were from or where that sofa was from. If you are resharing that image and you get a comment that says, love that sofa, your comment shouldn't be, thank you. Your comment shouldn't be, oh, it's from XYZ store, if that was not your design. Just again, you know, when I'm resharing someone's image, if there are comments that happen like that, I'm very clear in the to comment back, oh yes, I love that sofa that so-and-so designer picked out. If they're asking me, do you know who made it? You need to reach out to so-and-so designer, even if I do know who made it, because a lot of times designers don't want to share their sources.
Right.
And because I'm a blogger, part of my deal is to share my sources. When I do my own design projects, I do share my sources. But again, it's just little nuances like that you have to be really cautious about when you are sharing other people's work.
Superb
absolutely.
point. Superb point.
I love that. And I think that kind of ties into, we got a question, which is just what any best practices in alerting a non-credited post. And I'll answer that personally. Honestly, I'm very quick to, if I see someone post something and I know that it was by a designer that's not them, I'll just, and again, I think coming from the angle of positivity, like I'm not going to comment on that, what the hell, you stole this, but I am very quick to, if I see something I know is work by a different designer, say, oh my gosh, you know, love this room by at XYZ. I don't know if anyone else does that, has any other things that they do.
Yeah, I just kindly slide into their DM and says, hey, thank you so much for sharing my photo. I'm glad it inspired you. Can you please provide the following credit to myself and to the designer?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it was just like an overlook or a mistake, and they're happy to make that change. And then, you know, sometimes they don't make that change, and I don't know, you know, I'm not going to like go sue them or whatever, which I could because of copyright, but I'm just saying, you know, it's really just doing it with kindness. And if it gets to a level where you need to get lawyers involved, I guess you can go that route. But for the most part, I haven't had any issues with them making that correction.
Yeah. We got another question, which is, when you're posting pictures of a project that has been professionally shot, should designers credit the photographer on every post, even if it's 20 or 30 separate photos or posts? I would be inclined to say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, again, it's definitely based on whatever the agreement you have with you and that photographer. But personally speaking, any photo that I have shot for you, I need to receive photo credit and the caption as well as a tag.
Great. And we have another interesting question, which I hadn't actually thought of this, that comes from a photographer, which is, what about when a client or someone who's reposting puts a filter on the image? Do you, as a photographer or as a designer, or Robert, as someone who had shot that, does that bother you that then it's kind of, you know, conveyed in a different way that you actually set up that shot?
It would bother me.
I would be so offended. I'd be like, what? This picture is perfect. Why are you putting a filter on it? No, I'm kidding.
Insult to the photographer. I mean, God, that's horrible.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to having that communication with your photographer. If you want to put a filter on something, ask them first. Most of them would probably be like, why? Can I just re-edit it to make it how you want it, or whatever the case may be? But again, no, I wouldn't recommend altering the image in any way. How copyright is set up basically you cannot modify the image or create a derivative work from it if you're not the copyright owner. So technically adding a filter is kind of modifying the original character of the photo. So I would stray away from doing that.
I mean, it's just so funny that we're talking about this now. Just in this last week, looking at Instagram, a few people have posted projects that I've done, not for House Beautiful, and I just like, yeah, that was a great shoot. That was one of my great shoots, and I'll put the date and where I did it, and all of a sudden that person will correct it right away. It's like, hello,
Yeah.
I see. Maybe you didn't know I did it, but maybe you did. But do a little research,
Right. No, I think that's absolutely true, and that should definitely be a takeaway for everyone. Is
Yeah.
I think at the very least, I mean, if you're thinking, and I see this as kind of an excuse sometimes. People say, like source unknown, or let me know. I'd love to know the source if people know it. If you're in doubt and you have no idea where that came from, don't post it. I mean, that should probably be a base lesson. We got another question here, which is that do you use specific hashtags when you're sharing photos of your own designs?
It's all I share. So I use different hashtags depending on what city my client is in. I'll share different hashtags depending on the space I'm sharing. So if it's, we're doing new construction in Boston, so there's lots of things relating to Brookline and Boston and historic renovation and, all sorts of things like that. So they're very specific for me. But my design credit is right there in the post, as well as photography credit if it's been shot.
So this is actually a really good question for people who are sharing other people's work. Personally, if I am resharing someone else's work that I didn't shoot or design, and or if I am sharing work that I shot but did not design, I do not hashtag. I only hashtag when it is a photo that I have shot and I designed. And the reason for that is because when you hashtag, a lot of these hashtags are giving that other party the right to reshare that work. And if you are not the creator of that work, you do not necessarily have the permission to allow Domino or whoever else to reshare that image. And so I would just be cautious again, using hashtags on work that is not your own, because sometimes you're opening a can of worms for that photo to be further distributed down the train.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but even on the base level too, obviously when you do a hashtag, then there are more kind of ports of entry, which is great if you're trying to get your own work out there and share. But if you're hashtagging, then it's not necessarily someone following you, Kiana, who sees it, who knows that you shot it and didn't design it, but someone who's following the hashtag, historic home, and they're seeing it out of context, which I think is probably.
And that's just my personal, like how I know there are people who reshare other people's work and still do hashtags. That just doesn't feel right for me because again, I didn't, it's not my design. So I don't feel like I have the right to put a hashtag connected to something that isn't mine. So that's just like a personal, thing that I have ethic wise, but that's what I would recommend. I know there are people who do it, but I just prefer not to.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so I'm going to ask our last question, and I think this is an interesting one because we've obviously all been on here talking about social media as what you are all posting as kind of creators, but this is kind of the flip side of that, which is that someone just asked what is it that the panelists enjoy seeing the most in terms of the content that they're following, that they're liking, and that they're seeing on social media.
For me, I love to see what's new lines. I love to see the brands that I participate with, using things in ways that I hadn't considered, things that we saw at market or this year didn't see at market, and things like that. Seeing what the magazines are loving because I'm chasing publication for all of the projects. So I'd love to see how the editor's eye envisions beauty and sees what they're showcasing and how are they framing it and what's their language with their readers, and those sorts of things is what I'm looking at, all the the editors and magazines, and I'm looking at other designers to inspire me and inform me of things that I hadn't considered and new ways of looking at things, and looking at photographers while I'm shopping for photographers all over the country, and looking for their POV and their way of doing things, and creating a feed that looks like it's representative of who I am and what I enjoy. And but I'm definitely interested in people who are leading their online businesses with integrity and rewarding that with my eyeballs. So my eyes are on their items and not giving eyeballs to things that are somewhat misrepresentative.
I mean, I use Instagram. To me, it's a magazine. It's inspiration. It's discovering whether it's a beautiful room, a flower, a personality, the way someone dresses. It's a mood board to me, and it's just it's a wonderful way of looking at life and a wonderful way of looking at design in the world that we live in. And you don't know what you're going to see. The funny thing is, I'll be a little bit conceited. Like, if I post a picture of myself, why the hell did I get 900 likes and you didn't like my flowering? It's just so weird.
People love you,
You're
Robert.
amazing.
How people,
Legend.
no, I don't mean it that way, but it's just so weird how people react to things. It's like, really?
And I can attest to that because, thinking about that question, what I'm enjoying seeing, and I don't know if it's just because, 2020 has been a crazy year, but I'm actually enjoying seeing humans, like human interaction behind the scenes of people's day to day. And, before it was just about the pretty picture, but now being able to see, behind the scenes of people and how they're working from home and things like that. I've actually been enjoying that connection, that human connection behind the pretty picture.
I agree. I mean, listen, it's like email. I love just picking up the phone and, hi, this is the answer to the project. We're not going to run it, but I like you. No, don't mean it that way, but
Don't say no.
just communication,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
So the idea of seeing someone at work or walking down the street or having a picnic or someone's little girl or children playing, it's a part of the portfolio, it's great. I love it. It's inspiring.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a wonderful note to end on here. Thank you all. I know Mika had to leave, but we'll thank Mika. Thank you, Kiana, Robert, Lori. This was great. Everyone watching, make sure obviously to follow them. And thank you to 200 Lex, New York Design Center, for hosting this. I had a great time. I hope everyone else did too.
I did.
And
do it again.
great day.
Another topic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.
Bye, Christina. Thank you, 200 Lex.